we'll do a little welcome, and we'll get David to do an official welcome as such, and about the MIRA association with METS. Then we'll do some introductions, so we'll hear a little bit more from each of you. And then we're going to talk about the tools and resources that we like to use to work through validating the problem and customer fit. And those tools and resources get used further throughout the program as well, but we'll introduce you to them today. And we'll start to talk about what does it mean to actually identify a problem and customer, and how do we validate that. And then we'll have our mentors join us, and we'll continue that conversation with them. So we'll cover some of the theoretical stuff before they get here. And then once they join us, we'll have a bit of a conversation around the practical element of that and how that works in this particular sector. And then once we've had that conversation, then we'll go into those breakout rooms where you'll be able to talk to each of the mentors one-on-one. And then we'll just come back together before we finish, and our timing may not be exactly 12:15. I think we'll probably finish a little early, but it depends on how long your one-on-one conversations go. And we'll just make sure that we understand for everybody how we can communicate ongoing and what the next steps are for us today. So I might just, we'll just touch here that we'll have 3 different breakout rooms, but also a breakout room with myself at the end as well, where we'll just talk about setting actions for what we're going to do going forward and how we can help you. So making sure that I understand where you're at on your journey, what you need support with, and what you're going to work on for the week. So we'll do that in those breakout sessions as well. We may even put Jeremy and Quinton together. They're both from QTech, so we might put them together in one room. We'll see how we go. We have opened up the later part of the session to people who haven't applied to be part of the program but are still interested or curious in being involved in the METS sector. So we may have a couple of other people drop in a little later in the day as well. So David, do you want to do a little welcome and introduction there?
Sure. Okay, welcome everybody to MIRA. So this is the second year for the MIRA program. The first one, of course, was run face-to-face and culminated in a demo day. This year we're doing everything online, and the program is set up a little bit differently. It's a very heavily mentor-focused program, so utilising the conversations that you have with your mentors so that you can gain the greatest benefit is my biggest recommendation. So understanding who you want to talk to, who you need to be connected with, who you'd like to try and run maybe a trial or an experiment of some sort, and find out what their problems are that need to be solved, then use your mentors to the best advantage that you can. And each week is now divided up into six major topics, really. So over the 6 weeks, the 7th week, we aim to have a bit of a video reflection demo day, where we will ask if you're able to just record a brief video reflecting on the MIRA program, what you found out, what you know, what you need to know still, what you're looking for, what help you need, different things like that. Then that would be fantastic as well. But the program is now on. Obviously it started, but it is also still available to any other participants that wish to join it, and whether they want to do it on a essentially a full-time basis and attend the rest of the next 5 weeks, or if they want to drop in on a particular week and join a workshop, for instance, and then attend the panel session and mentoring around that topic, then it's available. So if you've got colleagues, friends, any other people interested in this topic, anybody else that is interested in engaging with the METS industry, engaging with government, engaging with energy resources, mining, water, agriculture, space, any of those allied parallel industries, then let them know. Send them to the MIRA website where they can see the the program, see what the topics are, and they can all then come and join in as well. So yeah, so that's it really in a nutshell. We're looking forward to moving this along over the next 6 weeks. We're trying to track down a participant that wanted to be involved, but seems to have fallen off the planet. We're just hoping that he hasn't caught anything anything bad. And unfortunately, we did have one person this morning drop out of the program, which is a shame. But I've now invited them. They couldn't commit for the period, but I've now let them know that they might be able to drop in on any of the other sessions if they find that they can. So welcome aboard. We're excited to be able to present this. We're presenting it on behalf of METS Ignited and the Queensland Government, and we're doing that as Startup Toowoomba, and ably supported from Canvas Co-working. And Joy's your program facilitator, and I'm the program manager. So that's a little bit about me now. I think I'll just, can I just go straight into a bit about me now, Joy? No, not yet. Okay. I'll throw things back to Joy.
Can you still hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, all right, sorry. It was a little slip there. So one thing that David mentioned was that this is with METS Ignited. So METS Ignited have a 4-part approach to their mandate, their objective as an organisation. And one is around accelerating commercialisation of companies that associate with mining, so mining equipment, mining technology, and mining services. The other is enhancing the business capability of the businesses in that sector, growing exports, and also improving the regulatory environment for mining. So that's METS Ignited's overall focus areas. For the MIRA program, we focus on assisting with the first 2. So we're looking at helping in regards to accelerating the commercialisation of new ideas and new products and services, and also enhancing business capability. So making sure that we're giving you the support you need to make sure that you can deliver whatever it is that your business needs to deliver. So we're not to say that we're not interested in exports and the regulatory environment, but that's not the purpose of MIRA. We're just focused on those first 2 components. So now we do want to hear from you all, so that we know who's in the room. And I know we had a little bit of a chat before, but I know you haven't heard necessarily what everyone is working on. So we just want to get a bit of an introduction, and David, you do get to go first. So you can introduce us from Startup Toowoomba, and then we'll just go around the room and we'll hear from each of you. So pretty much what we want to hear is, where you are, what it is that you're working on, and a little bit about your background, and perhaps what stage you're up to with your venture. So whether you actually have customers already, whether you're generating revenue yet, whether you're maybe still prototyping or just still at the idea stage of whatever it is that you're working on. And then if you want to add to that a little bit as well, what you're hoping to get out of this program, that would be helpful, so that obviously us, and we know a little bit because you wrote your application, but other participants can also hear each other, because there's often a lot that comes from the value of the cohort. So knowing what someone else is doing and what they need and what they're working on can just be a light bulb moment to go, oh, I should, introduce you to such and such. So that's what we want to get an understanding of. And obviously we're going to be working through lots of different elements of business and what we're talking about. So I'll just preface this as well by saying that even though, as I mentioned, we're recording it, it's for our closed group purposes, and that we expect that everything that you say and hear will stay here unless it's expressly requested to share that information. And if you're unsure, please clarify before you talk about anything that you've heard here outside of this this room, as such, virtual room that it is, because we want that openness of conversation, but knowing that it's confidential and that anything that you say is in confidence and won't be shared with anyone else. So yeah, if you're unsure, always just go back to the person who said it and clarify, is this something that we can talk about or not? Unless of course they've expressly said, please tell everybody, in which case, please tell everybody. But otherwise assume that it's please don't tell anybody unless I've expressly, or they have expressly said so. So David, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Joy. So I'm David, obviously, founder of Startup Toowoomba and president of Canvas Co-working. Had a few businesses over the years, been in a few different jobs over the years. So a bit of experience, but the key area that I like to really operate in is grassroots innovation, early stage startups, ideation, problem discussing, looking for solutions to problems, and helping people verbalize that, help them understand where the customer is at, where their solution is at, how that fits, and that sort of area. So that's sort of the key interest I have, and so yeah, that's really about me in a nutshell. And so I'll throw across to Joy.
Oh, thank you. So I guess for the benefit of Trent and Darren both, a little bit of my background. So I have been working through Canvas Co-working and Startup Toowoomba now for about the last 5 years. But prior to that, my background was in finance. So I spent over 20 years working in the finance industry in a number of different roles, some of those in relation to business development and training, and others more frontline roles. So in the latter part of my career, I spent several years as an agribusiness manager and credit credit analyst for NAB. And during that time, I was able to see a lot of the potential that some of the clients that I had were not realizing upon, because they didn't look at their business in a strategic way, and also weren't utilizing some of the digital technologies that were either available already or becoming available. So when I had the opportunity to transition out and start the co-working space, and by extension Startup Toowoomba, and facilitating programs and doing training outside of the banking sector, then that's enabled me to, I feel, expand my skills, but also the reach that I have with people who are looking to do things differently. I love agriculture still, and all that entails, but there's a lot more that goes with it. And obviously with a lot of years of drought, it's been a challenging sector to work with or within, and a lot of people looking to diversify. So that's been really good. So I really enjoy what I'm doing now. And I get to travel a lot, which is also great, and share my experience with people in different countries and learn from them as well. So that is me. So the next one I have is Jara Industries. So we've got Trent with us today. So Trent, do you want to introduce yourself? Oh, and I just can't hear you. You might still be on mute.
Right. I'll turn the video off because it'll probably work better, but I just thought I'd do that. So you can hear me all right, I assume. Yeah, Jara Industries is owned by myself and my business partner, Tyson Cooney. We met 6 years ago when we worked for an energy equipment startup in Toowoomba. We're based in Toowoomba as well. And it was an interesting place to work. All the equipment that was built there was, one-offs and bespoke, and we really found our groove working there. And the company sold out to bigger company in 2018, and at that stage we decided that we would have a go ourselves and try and build a company that where we could utilise the skills that we'd honed over the years there, where we love designing equipment and we love building it. So Tyson's an RPQ registered engineer. I'm a certified boilermaker, and I do pressure welding and all the fabrication for Jura. I was production and workshop manager at the company we worked at before, so Tyson and I developed a fairly strong working relationship there, and figured we were a reasonable chance of working together for our own company. So I guess it's bespoke equipment and products that where we feel our strengths are, and it's predominantly oil and gas industry. We've both worked in that for probably the last 12 years. I've worked for Eastonwell and over there previously, so fairly strong background in oil and gas. And you know, it's been the #1 game in town for manufacturing in Toowoomba for probably the last 10 years at least. And we've developed the skills that you need in that industry to succeed, and we've got a fairly good basis there. So we're working currently in oil and gas industry, and we have most of our clients are in that. Well, pretty much all of them are. We do have some experience in water infrastructure and agriculture builds and that sort of thing as well, but it's mostly oil and gas, a little bit of mining equipment as well. But so I guess we're solutions builders, and a lot of the work we've done over the years is companies that need to have a solution, a mechanical solution for problems they're facing in the field, whether it's pumping fluid or removing material from drilling waste and water cleaning and that sort of thing. So that's a lot of where we've worked, and that's what we enjoy doing. So we're working in that now. Currently we're doing gas compression skids, and we've been doing that for the last 16 months, I guess, and that's been really good. But we're looking, to move into new industries, and the one we see having some potential in the future and one we can build our company around is hydrogen, and we see that coming as being a carbon-free fuel for the future, and there's a lot of pluses for using a hydrogen industry, and we'd like to be involved in that area, mostly because it's new and it's exciting and it's clean and carbon-free, and there's lots of pluses, and we feel that our skill sets will transfer to the hydrogen industry quite well. It's all gas transfer, and we understand that. So I guess where we're at now is trying to link up with people that are in the industry, and it's very young. It's only just started getting talked about in Parliament circles, but it is a real thing and it is coming, and it's to find the contacts that are there now, and the companies that are going to be the first ones to move on this industry. The government's put a lot of money behind it already, and we would like to be part of that. So I guess we've got some ideas for some products and some equipment that this industry will need, and that's why we're keen to move that way, and with this program coming up, I thought it might be a good way to put ourselves out there and see where it could take us, and also being a young company, bit of business development and the mentorship aspect of the program is also what I'm looking forward to, talking with some of the experts and trying to push ourselves forward. So I guess that's pretty much a wrap on where Jura is at.
Wonderful. Thanks, Trent. And yeah, it's exciting. I think the potential, and I'm certainly not across all of what's happening in regards to hydrogen, but as a former student of climatology, I know that, yeah, there's so much benefit to be had in finding those carbon-free fuels, so and utilising them. So that's exciting that that's the way that you're looking to head, and hopefully we can help you on that journey, because, yeah, it's the future depends on us really
I think
in
so.
finding that. So awesome. Very good. Thank you. And obviously, yeah, if we do have the opportunity to have Tyson drop in at all over the 6 weeks, it would be lovely for everyone to meet him as well. But we know, yeah, you have to keep the wheels turning and building what you need to build, and building those relationships wherever they need to be built as well. So, but yeah, if at any time he's got a few minutes, he's more than welcome to drop by. So
Yeah, no, we'll work on that one for sure.
Yep. Thank you very much. Awesome. All right. So Darren, we will jump to you next. So if you would like to introduce yourself and SensorWeb, that would be
great. Sure. So we're SensorWeb. Darren is my name, obviously, and Simon is my co-founder. His background is around radiation protection and radiation safety. So for probably 20 years or so, he's worked in the radiation protection space around at the nuclear reactor down at Lucas Heights, as well as at universities and mines, etc. And so his SensorWeb came about when he had to basically walk around every day to check on all these radiation monitors that are checking radiation, obviously. But he had been manually recording the results and writing them down and all that kind of stuff. And so it was very manual, very labor intensive, and quite mundane, really. So we met probably about 5 years ago. Our wives are friends. The kids did, they met at the local learn to swim class, and just kind of hit it off. And so at barbecue, we're discussing obviously what we're doing, and he brought up this idea of remote and automated radiation monitoring, which my background is in IT, and as an IT developer and an IT executive for about 20 years, and I just didn't believe that nothing like this already existed, because it just seemed ludicrous that in this day and age it was so manual, and yet it is. And so we started building this out as a side project. So it's and now it's morphed into full-time. Full-time for Simon, kind of half-time for me. But it's been so we build radiation monitors, and they send the data immediately back to our dashboard, our data platform, and it also does reporting and notifications, and all the monitoring, all the things you'd expect from a monitoring platform, with the added advantage of also providing and producing the automated reports that they need to send to regulators every quarter or so, with all of their radiation details. Radiation is, it seems like quite a niche thing, but that was my other thought, was that it's, it might be useful for a couple of companies, but basically everywhere that's got an X-ray machine, and everywhere that has radiation or radioactivity in use in their operations has a need to monitor the radiation according to the health regulations. So basically any dentist or vet or hospital, university, mines, etc., all have a requirement to monitor radiation, and the way they do it now is very manual and stuck in the 50s in terms of the way that it's done. So SensorWeb was built, and with particular interest in the mining sector, we had a pilot product in a diamond mine in Northern Territory about 2 years ago. That mine has since gone bust. It wasn't run very well. but we got some good data out of that and some good information just around the ability to not just monitor the radiation, but because that one was running on a generator, we'd also know exactly when that generator was turned on and off. And this was monitoring an XRT X-ray, so it was X-raying for quality of diamonds, and our monitoring outlasted the X-ray machine because it's using the generator. They just switched the generator on and off without powering down the X-ray machine, and so it ended up just busting all the electronics of the X-ray machine. So we outlasted that, which we're proud of. It's not just radiation. Well, it's different forms of radiation that we're also monitoring. So while there's X-ray machines, etc., at use in mines, there's also particularly for underground mines, there's also concerns around radon, which is the second largest cause of cancer after cigarette smoking. And radon occurs more so underground, and it's basically the leaching of the radioactive particles from say uranium or just rocks in general underground, and it's and that's more airborne radiation more so than from a specific source. And so for underground mines, and also in a lot of countries around the world, not so much Australia, but we should be doing more monitoring of radon. But a lot of other countries will have radon monitors in their basements as well, for that same reason of being able to record the levels of radon. And again, they're all very very manual and rather than being connected. Where we're up to is we have one key client that we're working with at the moment. They're in outback Western Australia and currently building a waste management facility. They're about it's about 150 k's northwest of Kalgoorlie, so very much in the middle of nowhere. And it was and so our first full install is out there at the moment. That was just in February. They hadn't had their communications installed, so we're a little bit in the dark to how that's going at the moment, and we can't travel there, so that makes it a little bit more challenging. But as soon as we're able to travel to Western Australia, then we'll be back over there just to put in place the communications links because their satellite trailer is going to be in place then. So what we're looking for out of MIRA is just being able to get more understanding of how to get into mining and oil and gas companies, ideally for getting some warm introductions into these sites, and being able to I guess fully test out what we think is testing that we think is beneficial, and if not, then how can we meet more pain points and resolve more pain points within the mining industry when it comes to these types of sensors that are traditionally disconnected and dumb sensors instead of the smart sensors. That's about us.
Awesome. Thanks, Darren. So I just made a few notes there as you were talking. It's really interesting when you hear someone start to talk about something that you already know that you probably know quite little about, and then once they start talking, it's like, oh yeah, I'd never even thought of that. Like vets and dentists and those sorts of things, yes, of course they have radiation stuff in them as well. You just don't, I guess when you're not working in it all the time, you don't think about it in that same way. So that's really just opened my mind a little bit more to the potential of what you're doing, but obviously in that mining sector, those introductions and helping solve potentially larger scale issues in remote locations particularly, where getting somewhere might not be easy, but if something happens, it could be significant. So yeah, that's awesome. All right, very good. So excited to hear all of that. And obviously with the program progressing through, we'll work through some of the elements that you've each spoken about, you know, wanting to work on more. I know a lot of what we will talk about, maybe some concepts that you are already familiar with or are already implementing within your business, but some may not, or they may remind you that whilst you know that, are you actually doing it and applying that, you know, that logical knowledge, I guess, in a productive and efficient way within your business. So we want to make sure that we're helping you there as well. So I've definitely made some notes about the things that you're looking for. And wanting to help you progress with that. We haven't had Orlando join us, so we were expecting him to be here this morning, so we will definitely try and follow up with him. But Orlando Deeth is also signed up and accepted into the program as well, and we're expecting him. So hopefully we'll catch him again soon. So now I just want to move on to a little session, and this won't take a long time because we're just really initiating this conversation here now, just with a little bit of theoretical side, and then we'll have our mentors joining us in about the next sort of 15 to 20 minutes. And then we'll continue this conversation really quite relative to the sector. So what we're going to cover now is, I guess, more generic theory. So when we're looking at this next section around problem and customer validation, you've already both started to talk about this a little bit. So I know that this is something that you're conscious of, and we want to make sure that we're working with you to enhance that knowledge. But it's one of the things that we find is the word that's often missed in that is around validation. And we can sometimes focus just on, you know, our customer or the person we think is our customer. And one of the things that Darren mentioned there was around the pain points and what is that problem that somebody has, and being able to validate that and confirm that it's not just something we think they have, but that they actually have is really important. And often the step that's missed when we're entering into something new, we can rely on our gut, which is great to a certain point. We can rely on historical research and data, which can also be very beneficial to a certain point, but then actually confirming that, you know, what we believe to be true is actually true in practice is also something else. So we want to make sure we're bringing all of that together. And checking on that. And we've just had someone join us, maybe one of our mentors. So we'll just let him in. Wonderful. Hey, Andrew. Nice to have you here. And there we go. So Andrew will introduce you in a moment. We're just covering a little bit of theory now, so hang tight and we'll come to you in a little bit. So the other thing, if we don't focus on the actual validation and in a real way, and not just, you know, we're always at risk of having our own bias and an unconscious bias in there. And if we don't become aware of that and really validate, then we are certainly at risk of failure. And usually that comes through from the, you know, neglecting to actually take that required action to confirm that what we believe to be true is actually true, and not just moving forward unknowingly. So we want to make sure we do that, because we don't want anyone to fail fully. We talk about failing fast, and we'll talk about that a little bit, and that's okay. It's good sometimes to learn that we were wrong on something, because then we can just move on or adjust, correct course. But we don't want you to, you know, be several years down the track and have spent, you know, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars building something that nobody needs. So when we're looking at some of the reasons why businesses fail, and this is some research that was done by a fellow particularly focused on America, but really that's because nobody does a lot of studies on anything particularly focused on Australia in this space. But when we're looking at new ventures that have failed, there's 7 key criteria that align with them as to why that is the case. And it can be a lack of focus or a lack of motivation or commitment. For those who are with us, obviously we've seen already that you're, on that journey. It's not just a brand new idea. So we believe that for you, that commitment is there. So that is a good to be able to tick those first couple off. Too much pride resulting in an unwillingness to see or listen. And this is one that we can all be guilty of sometimes. We believe that we're right and we know that we're doing something helpful for somebody, or we're doing something, but is it actually a viable business? Can sometimes be a different set. And if we're not willing to see and listen to the entire picture, then that can sometimes get in the way of us actually making the call to perhaps stop or pivot early enough. Taking advice from the wrong people is another thing. And whilst we've just had one of our mentors drop in, and I'm sure Andrew's got lots of awesome advice for you, we want to encourage you to be astute in all of your mentor conversations that you have through our mentors. And obviously we've been quite careful in selecting mentors, being people that we believe have the relevant experience and knowledge, but are also not afraid to say, actually, you know what, I don't know that. This might be my opinion, but I don't know the facts. So it's always important when you're taking advice from someone to understand how that advice is being given and whether it is being given in just an opinion or in a factual state as well, and not just believing everything, a professional or a mentor or an expert tells you, but still to do your own due diligence on that. Lacking good mentorship, and good mentorship can come in a variety of different ways, but often it's somebody who listens a lot to what you have to say, and then will give a well thought response, as opposed to just a knee-jerk reaction giving you suggestions of what you should do without really understanding the situation that you're in. So that can often be one of the things that we see quite frequently when it comes to mentorship. So again, we hope we've selected our mentors very well, and that they will listen and carefully respond. A lack of general and domain-specific business knowledge. So, as I mentioned before, my background is finance in particular. We've got mentors coming through with a lot of domain-specific knowledge, and again, we've talked oil and gas, different types of mining, energy, all of those different things. People, they've often worked in a particular sector for a long period of time. They might have crossed over and had some diversity within their experience. So for yourselves, your background is what it is as well, and you're growing and learning all of the time. But where we don't have enough knowledge, and it might be, business could be the issue, the thing that's missing. You might know all about oil and gas, for example, but don't know about running a business. So it's making sure that we're starting to bring that through in the relationships and the connections that we make, to help you cover both sides of that and keep it balanced. That also comes through in how we talk about things as well. And we'll be getting you to practice talking about what you do quite a bit. And obviously, you've each been able to speak quite clearly and, with a lot of background knowledge in where you're at the moment. So we want to make sure that we're enhancing that so that you can have a good conversation with whomever you're speaking with that's relevant to that particular topic or that person's expertise, so that you can draw out of them what you need that's going to help support you as well. And then the final part there is raising too much money too soon. And again, with my finance hat on, this is something we've seen in the past happen. Where people have access to too much money, so they just go forth and spend and don't always consider what that money could really be utilised for, or they're overcommitting themselves in being able to deliver a certain result or outcome or expectation to the funder, to secure more funding, or to tick a box that was set, even though that criteria perhaps should never been on the list of boxes to tick in the first instance, because it was beyond what that business was capable of delivering at this point in time. So making sure that your progress is obviously based on conversations and outcomes and commitments that are relevant, and not just based on having to fulfill a pledge that was made in exchange for money. So all of those things are really important, and we want to help make sure that you progress through the next stages of your business, being mindful that we don't want you to fail for any of those reasons. could potentially be other reasons that things may not work at different times, and we want to support you through that in learning how to move on to the next stage. The next little part here, and again, I don't want to dwell too much on failing, but it is really important to recognise the things that others have learnt from the experiences that they've had where things haven't worked, because no one goes into it going, okay, I'm going to do this thing and fail. Like that's not what we want. We want to succeed. We want you to succeed. So when we actually talk to people, working out what are those primary reasons for failure, often it is around the validity of the problem, and having really good quality conversations with customers. And that's why this particular program is particularly beneficial with these mentors that we have on board, because it allows you to start those conversations. And again, the mentor that you talk to may not actually be the person that's going to give you what you need, but they may have a connection to someone who does. And we want to make sure that wherever possible, we're helping curate that, but you still have to have that good quality conversation as you go. Also, understanding that your customer has a problem, and someone else is probably trying to solve that as well. So what are they doing already, and how are you going to be better or different? Also making sure that they actually have a willingness to pay for a solution, and we'll be talking to people and getting different mentors in from different levels of business, so some tier 1 and tier 2 companies, as well as government, and a variety of different people. Often the willingness and capacity to pay can vary, and if you've got someone who's willing but has no money, or has money but isn't willing, that's still not always going to help you make your business successful. The uniqueness of the solution with recognisable benefits and being able to clearly articulate those and communicate that with your potential customers is also really important, as is finding a niche within the market. And it was interesting, Darren, when you said, it's pretty narrow, but that can be quite good, particularly if it's not already saturated. So making sure that we understand who that ideal customer is really important, and then obviously, are there enough of them? Still, is the size of the market enough? So just before we click to the screen, there we go. Just a little quote there. I'm sure you're all aware of Amazon, and obviously Amazon's probably doing super well at the moment. But when we're thinking about business and starting, often the conversation will come around to, have you got a business plan? What's in your business plan? And Jeff Bezos, a very clever man, but he's like, a business plan won't usually work. As soon as you start, you'll realize that there's things in there that you didn't know or you thought would work one way, and nothing will ever run to plan. So the way we like to approach this is actually utilizing a tool called a lean canvas. There's also a business model canvas, which is quite similar. I'm a fan of the lean canvas. It's just a little cleaner to work with, but it helps just break down the different parts of your business that you need to be thinking about, and working out what you know and don't know, and giving you a starting point for validating. And you may have already done something like this before, but I'll share this with you later, that you can print one out, and otherwise you can do it however you like. A lot of people do it in a spreadsheet. That works just as well. But the idea here is to be constantly reviewing, what do we know at this point, and what do we believe to be true, and what do we actually know to be true, and adjusting and adapting. And we're going to talk through that a little bit more as well as we go through the next 6 weeks. But for today, we want to focus on just 2 of those segments, and that's around customer and problem. Because if we don't have a customer who has a problem, they're not likely to buy anything from us. So there's always opportunity, but what's the opportunity for? It's the opportunity to solve a problem for somebody, and understanding who that is and what that looks like. So on this particular canvas, the idea is that you put on what you know, or what you're thinking, but then you refine it down a little bit. And I'll just go through a quick example just to give you an idea. And I'm utilizing David's business for this one. So in determining what is the problem, the clearer we can describe that, the better. And often it's a layered problem. and we want to make sure that we've got the ideal customer in mind. So David has a business called Shed Blog, and this is an old website snapshot. And one of the products on there is a vermin proofing. So if we're thinking about what's the problem in this situation, we might be going, okay, well, there's layers to this problem. It could be that, there's rats getting into a shed. We're talking about vermin proofing. So there's rats getting into a shed and damaging the goods that are stored inside. Traps aren't sufficient due to the number of rats. You can't use baits because there's jogs around. The rats are getting into the shed through gaps in the sheeting, and the sheeting doesn't seal against the slab. But then we have to think about, okay, those are all parts of the problem, but if we're engaging a customer, what's that customer actually hiring you to do? They're hiring you to keep rats out of the shed. Okay, they don't necessarily want to kill them, they just want to keep them out. So it's breaking down your problem that you're solving for somebody, even though it has multiple layers, into a simple thing that you can describe really easily if you're talking to somebody. This is what we do, we keep rats out of the shed. Again, just a very simple example there. Now, you may have other problems that associate as well that are different to that core problem. You can look at it in different ways, but it's usually preferable initially to focus on one element so that you can define this. And often we find having different canvases can apply, where you can really think about this one problem and who is the customer for that problem. So when you move to thinking about your customer, it's important to understand that not everybody is actually a customer. Some people consider the customer to be the person who pays, and that can be the case. But your customer can also be the person who's going to use your product, who may never pay for it and never even be in part of the decision-making process at all. And if you've ever worked for a large organisation, and obviously a lot of mining companies are large organisations, the person who purchased the product and makes the decision to buy a product is not the person who'll ever use it, and probably don't often understand even how to use it, or sometimes why, but we would hope they know why they're buying it, or that they've got enough influence in there to make them make a good choice. But understanding both the end user as well as that decision maker and economic buyer is really important, because you're going to be able to solve different problems for each of them. And if you can clearly articulate that and know who you're talking to, as well as what that person's focus is in relation to the problem, it will help you get to the point much more quickly and advance your conversation much more quickly. If you're talking to somebody who is just trying to work to a budget and trying to help their people on the ground solve a particular problem, but you're firing at them all of these facts and figures and how it works, that they may not have any comprehension of that, and that the information is meaningless to them. They may just need to know, does it fit into their budget? And they might have someone else who actually understands the hows, or they want the numbers, or they want the data. So it's really important to clarify that when you're thinking about who you're talking to, and also to make sure that you understand the importance that each of those has in relation to the other, and not neglecting anybody. So the end user may have a lot of influence over what is actually purchased, or the repurchase or the reuse of a product. So if you don't ever engage with them and find out what they like and don't like about something, it's going to be difficult for you to actually satisfy or make changes to satisfy them. And even though you may be talking to a decision maker or an economic buyer, if the end user is saying, look, I don't like it, it doesn't work, don't buy it again, you may never have that feedback channel and get that information that you need, and they might just cancel your contract or not renew. So we want to understand that really clearly. So in this case, in the example, the people who would potentially be customers are people who are buying homes, farmers, shed sellers, shed owners. But we want to try and narrow that down as well to who would be the one most likely to engage with us in the early stages, because we just don't have time to go and talk to everybody everywhere. So thinking about, who has the problem the most, who potentially has, the most flexibility in their budget to try new things, who do we know well that already trusts us, knows us and trusts us. All of those things can influence who becomes your early adopter, who's likely to take up a pilot with you, who's really in need of this problem, who's likely to engage with you throughout the design process, and thinking about who needs it the most as well. So again, for this example, we might be focused on someone who owns a shed that lives in a semi-rural area that's not too far from us that actually has a rat issue. So we'd narrow that down, as opposed to trying to go to every commercial builder or every shed reseller in the country. That's just not viable for us. So we would narrow it down, and it's going to be the same for you, and obviously thinking about who that is. And I know you're on that journey a little already, but really bringing that in. And then the final part is this business, this customer that you have, they're already doing something. They can't be neglecting it fully. And as Darren mentioned, it might be a really manual process. It might be very labor intensive. It might be dangerous. It might be, there's a whole lot of things that it could be that are issues with it, but they are doing something, and we need to really understand what that is. And again, it could have multiple layers to it as well. But it's often a temporary solution, or it's a quite historically ingrained solution that it's always been done that way. Okay, that's just how we do it. That's the way the industry works, or that's what policy says we have to do, or something like that. So we need to fully understand what those existing alternatives are that your customer is using now, and if there is nothing. And sometimes, very rarely, there is nothing at all, but usually that's only if it's all moving forward into a new sector. So Trent, for example, hydrogen, I know that there's not nothing, but there's going to be so many new things that become issues that need to be resolved where there is no solution already. So coming up with unique design solutions is definitely going to be part of what that is. But if it's similar to what's been done, say in gas, oil and gas, then you can take some of that and adapt it, and that's what people will do themselves as well. And that's what we need to understand, is where does their level of knowledge lie? Where is their background? What are they going to try and jerry rig together to make this work? And what are the issues that could encompass as well? So we want to make sure that we're thinking in their shoes. What can I do? What can I stitch together if I don't already have an existing alternative, even though what you're proposing may certainly be far and above better. You might have ideas for how they can do things differently, and working together can really help that. So that's the sort of thing that we want you to be able to articulate as well. And again, I've just put a little example there that if you've got, rats getting into a shed, you might be able to just put some timber around the base, or shove the holes full of steel wool. That would solve the problem, but still not an ideal solution, and something that's only perhaps temporary or a bit makeshift. So hopefully that is just a super fast run through of that, but that's what we want to think about, is what is that problem, who has it, who are they, and who do we have access to the quickest to go through. We are going to make a lot of assumptions in the beginning, and you probably have been doing that, and that's just what has to happen. But if you're familiar with the little breakdown of that word, an assumption can sometimes mean making an ass of you and me. So having access to our mentors can help us talk through some of these things, some of these assumptions that we're making, and certainly talking to our customers or potential customers, people in the industry, those different layers, so users and influencers and decision makers within these companies can help us move through, or move something from being an assumption to being a fact. So coming up with a short hypothesis statement is something that we would ideally recommend that you do, something that you can can clearly articulate very easily to anyone that you meet when they say, you know, what are you working on? What are you doing? Or why are you doing that? So it's, you know, a short statement where it's like, I believe, or we believe, that this particular person, this particular industry, business, whatever it might be, experiences this type of problem, and describing that problem so that people understand what it is. And while they're doing whatever they're doing. So again, describing that situation, because you may find that the person that you're talking to might not be your customer, but they may know someone, okay? And the more clearly you can articulate this, then they can go, yeah, such and such was talking about that at a barbecue, or I've seen that, or I've heard that, or this guy has that. So it's often, again, about building that network of people, and the more clearly we can articulate this in everyday language to the people that we're going to be talking to about that, the more likely we are to get to the person that we need faster. So that's what we want to try and do. So another tool that we can use to make this, I guess, more of a process rather than just a random sort of action that we do, and not that there's anything wrong with having some random actions in life, but in following a process, it is to create this hypothesis of who is the customer and who is the problem, what is the problem rather. But then what are our core assumptions that associate with that? Because there'll be lots of underlying assumptions that we have, and it could be around the experience, the behaviour, the knowledge, the access to funds, the access to resources, you know, the access to talent. All of those sorts of things can be assumptions that we make, and sometimes you know, unconsciously, and sometimes quite intentionally we believe something. So making a list of what assumptions you feel, and this can be quite good to do, particularly if you're going to have the opportunity to pitch to someone, and you know, or get an interview with somebody to talk to them, is to really think about what are these core assumptions that you have about that person and that business, and then how can you validate those? How can you find out if your assumption is correct or not? And that's usually by running some form of experiment. You may have dozens of assumptions, identifying which ones are the riskiest assumptions, the ones that if you're wrong, this just won't work. Like it just ends now if that assumption isn't true. So knowing that is really important. And, you know, I'll just use the example of hydrogen. So let's just say, you know, we believe that they have access to hydrogen to, you know, to create clean power. Well, no, they don't. Okay, the government's just cut off all access to hydrogen, so they don't. Okay, so if that was the case, which God forbid, but no, I'm sure it won't be, but if that was the case, you know, the ability to produce products to help, you know, utilize hydrogen would not be a thing because there was no supply. So, you know, you need to be aware of what those things are. Now, that was a very simple example, but there may be something within those core assumptions that you have about that particular business or about that particular person, that if you just keep moving forward believing it's true and it's really not, you're just wasting your time. So acknowledging what they are and then working out how to validate them is super important. So just a little example hypothesis there. So, you know, I believe that shed owners in semi-rural areas experience loss of goods due to rats while storing property in their shed. Very simple. They either do or they don't. So I need to go find that out. And how can I do that? So in testing assumptions, there's three sort of basic ways. So one is exploration. So it's looking at research, it's the collection and analysis of data, it's looking at what's happened in the past. And often we can make some, you know, some validity to our assumptions by looking at what has happened in the past or what is currently happening in the sector. So that can help to a certain point. Pitching, so actually talking to people, talking to potential customers and others associated to that problem, about their experience, about how they do things, about what they've tried doing. You know, you can cover off on a lot of those assumptions that you have by actually just having a conversation. And then the other one is a concierge process. So this is actually doing what you think is going to work and running it as a little trial or test, but in a fast, simple and cost-effective way that's not going to make you go broke, but often this will test behaviours. Will people react or respond the way you think they will? And what does that look like? So you set some parameters around your experiment. I believe that people will do this, they'll react this way, they'll respond this way, they'll take this action, whatever it might be. And then you create some sort of, it can be a bit of smoke and mirrors sometimes, but you create something that will see, will they engage with you the way they thought that you thought? And test that, and then find out, okay, do they do what I thought? What questions do they have? What were their expectations? And you can tinker with that. Now, obviously, I'm not suggesting that you only do a dodgy weld up of something that's going to hold hydrogen. That's not what I mean. It still has to be functional. It still has to work. It still has to be good, but we just don't want it to cost the earth to trial it and test it. So running, small sort of behaviour-based tests can be quite important in the early stages of testing if we think people are going to respond. So that is pretty much what I wanted to cover. So this week I will share with you, and we'll talk about communication channels in a little bit, but I will share with you those two tools. And again, your choice. A lot of people will just use a spreadsheet or something like that. But in actually determining what is your customer problem hypothesis, so who is your customer and what is the problem that they have, and what are those core assumptions that you're making, and which ones of those do you see to be critical, that if you're wrong, you would have to pivot and change what you're doing to get on the right track to actually solving that problem once you identify what it actually is. If your hypothesis or your assumption was incorrect, what was correct, and then can you still move forward from there? Because we know that we don't know a lot at the beginning. There's we know lots, but there's also lots we don't know. So we want to make sure that we're narrowing that down as much as we can and finding out the actual answers that we need to be able to move forward with confidence.